Hello and welcome to the Thought Leader Recruiter podcast, where we dive into how recruitment is evolving in our era of technology, data, and automation. I'm your host, Sam Bylett, and today I'm joined by Jay Lucas. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Great to have you here, Jay. So let's start with your journey first. How did you get into recruitment and what led you to where you are today?
I think, like most recruiters, you don't necessarily get into recruiting on purpose.
Yeah.
I had graduated college and was in a sales position. I was working for a family. My dad owned a company and I worked for him selling medical equipment. One of my close friends from high school, a year behind me in high school, had gone off to college. And when he graduated, he got recruited by a staffing company, a technical staffing firm, and they were hiring like crazy. And their typical recruiter profile was college graduate, young, hungry, not afraid to work hard. And he got a job there, and 3 weeks later, I got a job there. Working for the family business was fine. It's just there wasn't really, a lot of career path. There wasn't, my dad's company was relatively small. And so, you get to a certain point and you're looking for a little bit more mentorship and growth opportunity. And, you want to work with other people who have similar interests or maybe a similar stage in life. And so, like I said, he started and 3 weeks later I started, and now I've been at it for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting you say that. No one actually plans to go into recruiting. Literally everyone says that. Everyone either
Yeah.
falls, but there's always a story around it. That's why I always ask it. It's so interesting. So yeah, you've worked across various industries, from IT to heavy equipment. How do recruitment challenges differ from these sectors?
It's interesting. I think probably the biggest distinguishing factor is the the degree of competition. I learned, it took me a long time to figure this out, but what I learned was the more generalist you are, the harder it is to compete because there are so many people that can claim to be a recruiter. I mean, the barrier to entry in our industry is very low. So you have what I would call a very segmented or fragmented industry. So you got a lot of 3, 4 person, 5 person recruiting firms. You got a lot of 10, 15, 20 person staffing firms. And I think HR generally has a hard time sort of differentiating the difference between a staffing agency and a recruiting firm and an executive search firm. And so when you say, for instance, I'm an IT recruiter, well, that covers a huge spread. I mean, you could say, well, I do application developers. And then you could say, well, I do Java developers. And then you can say, well, I do Java developers with this particular feature. And you can get really niche. You can say, well, I do ERP recruiting. And you can say, well, okay, I do SAP recruiting. Or I specifically do ABAP developers in SAP. So the more niche you get, the better, because you really lock competition out because your talent networks are deeper and you generally are juggling more of the same types of jobs, which gives you, from a recruiting capacity, more throughput. But I use a juggling as a metaphor. If you're juggling and you have 5 apples, that's a whole lot easier than juggling an apple and a raspberry and a pineapple and a watermelon. And a lot of times, the more general you get, the more variety you have in your juggling act. The more variety you have, the harder it is to manage. And so it's all about throughput and depth and locking competition out. So, so that's probably the biggest thing. And then, of course, it just comes down to recruitment process after that. Actually having systems and processes. How do you source? Where do you source? How do you engage those people? Again, even on the recruiting side, not just on the selling side. The deeper your knowledge around a particular skill set or industry, the deeper your talent networks, the more overlap that you have in your network, let's say on LinkedIn, with other people that you're trying to connect with, the more likely it is that they're going to connect with you. than say you don't have any shared connections at all. So anyway, that's probably my feedback is to go as niche as you possibly can, and then to make sure that you have good systems and processes to support your recruiting.
Yeah, for sure. Specialist always beats a generalist in that term, for sure. And what's your view on brand positioning? How important is branding now for recruitment firms today?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two types of brands, in my opinion. You have your, uh, we'll call it your product brand, your what you provide as a service, and that's what you market to your customer, to your target audience. So, a good example might be the difference between Honda and Cadillac, or I don't know, Jaguar and Hyundai. And so that's the brand that the consumer sees. So for us, the consumer is the employer. They're the ones who call us and say, I need you to help me fill this job. Then you have an employment brand, and that is, who are we and what's our value proposition in terms of being able to attract and recruit people. So on the customer branding side, though, what I would say is it goes back to niche. Yes, absolutely critical that you can brand yourself as an expert. So for us, we look at, okay, well, what are our sort of distinguishing factors? What separates us, let's say, from any other recruiting firm that can claim they can fill this job just as easily or quickly or as effectively as anybody else? And so we started years ago using Traction, which is the entrepreneurial operating systems strategic planning methodology. And, in that you define sort of what they call, I forget what the official phrase for it, but the three uniques, I think is what they refer to it as. And those three uniques are the things that differentiate you from, your competitors. And they're not that no one else can have those uniques. It's the recipe. It's how you blend those three. And for us, we found that we actually have five. And so our reputation is at the center of that. It's foundational because it doesn't really matter about anything else if you don't have a good reputation. I mean, who today doesn't buy a product or a service and instantly go to online reviews for some guidance, And so for us to, what's critical to us is getting 5-star reviews. So then you go, okay, well, how do we do that? Well, you have to have systems and technology that provide for you the ability to deliver effectively what you say you're going to deliver, at what you tell your customer you can do, that you actually can do that you do that. We have a guarantee, and guarantees are kind of laced throughout our process. They're not uncommon in our industry, but we apply them a little bit differently. We are industry experts in heavy equipment, and so having industry expertise. And so those are just examples of, from a branding perspective, like it's all of those things that are really important, that if I'm going to engage a prospect in a conversation about using us when they could use the myriad other recruiting firms that will say they can do the work for them just as effectively, like what is our key differentiator? And it is the blend of those things, but generally it's our reputation. It's the fact that we have industry expertise, that not only are we industry experts, but we understand the positions that are core and central to how that industry operates. And then we understand, in our industry, it's the product. So the different types of machinery that our clients manufacture and sell. Agricultural equipment is different from material handling, is different from power systems, is different from construction, is different from mining. And so with the blend of understanding a recruitment process, understanding the industry, understanding the jobs that make the industry work, and then understanding the machinery itself, that's what helps us with our branding. That's really, I mean, branding is ultimately how you differentiate yourself. How do you instill some sense of confidence in your target audience that you are reputable, that you are worth considering?
Yeah, yeah, so important, and with so much competition, it's absolutely crucial that your branding stands out. Absolutely. And how about client acquisition? How's that changed in recruitment over the years, and what's working best for you now?
You know, it really depends. We have certain All right. The first thing that you have to be careful of is not all customers are created equal. So it goes back to niche, right? The more niche you can get, the better. So now you can really define, okay, so in our strategic planning, we actually set out like, all right, who is our target customer? Well, if I'm an IT recruiter, every company has IT needs. Well, that's not very niche, you know? So for us, we define demographic and we define geographic and we define psychographic. We define industry. And it is those things. So psychographic might be philosophically what is their mindset. So for us, it's partnership. You can be a heavy equipment company, but just because you're a heavy equipment company doesn't mean that you're an ideal client for us. So from a talent or from a customer acquisition perspective, it is really all about do they value us as a partner? Do they see us as a vendor or do they see us as a partner? And do they create a culture that's a winning culture? Because the reality is if they tell me, Jay, go find me XYZ, if they have a culture that's corrosive, it doesn't matter how good of a job I do at finding them a qualified candidate. So to me, I tell this story a lot. This is an analogy. So if your company is a fish tank, your culture is the water. If the water in your fish tank is dirty and you think that you can come put a fresh new fish into your fish tank and that it's going to thrive in your dirty water, you're wrong. And is that a recruitment issue or is that a leadership issue on the company's part? And so for us, customer acquisition really is understanding the industry, understanding those organizations, and it's not a perfect process, but functionally, technically speaking, once you have that defined, yeah, a lot of it's the same. It's developing. Now, I mean, these days technologies are available so that you can put multi-channel campaigns together, and so you're using not just email or phone, you're adding text, you're adding LinkedIn connects, you're adding InMails, you're adding likes and comments and at mentions on social media. You're engaging with that audience in a very passive way through what we're doing right now. And so how do I acquire those customers? Well, it's a lot of the information that you share in your LinkedIn feed. LinkedIn is obviously a channel that it's hard to exist as a recruiter today without it. And so how do you leverage it to differentiate yourself with your customer segment? So adding the right contacts to your network, having some sort of communication cadence that helps you tell your story, but not always asking for something. Sometimes you have to offer things multiple times to build equity in that relationship before you can actually ask for something in return. Figuring out what that model is, man, I mean, it's a lot of it's just timing. Don't look like a buffoon and and have good timing. And good timing is really all about activity. So as much as you can automate, the better. So for us, we try to automate a lot of that. But there's a real fine balancing act between automation and robotics. Your emails cannot feel like they're mechanical. Your outreach cannot feel impersonal. And so how do you avoid feeling impersonal and looking or appearing like a robot when you automate? And there are ways to do that, but you have to find the technology to help you do that. You have to really do the work. I mean, we spend a lot of time looking at platforms, looking at systems to build into our stack that help us do this. But, recruiting and selling in our industry, they are exactly the same. The process is exactly the same. It is identify your target audience. So if you're a recruiter, it's what kind of candidate am I looking for? What level of candidate, what industry, what title, etc. On the sales side, it's who's my hiring manager? What size or type or scope of company is it? What industry is it in? Then it's build your list, top of funnel, then execute the outreach process, whatever that looks like. For some people, it's simply just email. For other people, it's email and a phone call. For some people, it's just InMail, and for some, it's some blend of all of those. And eventually you run people through a process, and in volume, you find your opportunities. Your timing is perfected in volume is basically what I'm saying. So I think that's probably been true in the past. It's just we have better tools today than we've ever had before.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to that analogy, I love that. I think I'll have to steal that from you. Very good. I love that. That hits the spot, definitely. Recruitment companies truly embracing technology, or do you think there's still a bit of resistance there?
I think some are. I think, we go back to how fragmented our industry is. What you have is a sort of old guard. These are guys that are, at the tail end of their career. They've been doing this a really long time. They don't have the desire to want to go figure out how to make technology work. They're kind of old school, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those guys do a fine job. In a lot of ways, they're actually better recruiters. And then you have those who are a bit more tech forward. I'm like that. I hate inefficiency. I really am passionate about efficiency. And so there are necessary elements to the recruiting process that are administrative. They're not the best use of my time, but they are absolutely critical. So the question then is, how do you leverage technology to automate those critical but administrative components, those repetitive components of the process, and so that you can get more done, so that my time is focused on the highest value activities like sourcing, screening, client engagement, etc., marketing. So I think there are some who are better at it than others, but I think there's enough work to go around. Like I said, it's such a fragmented industry that but eventually I think what's going to happen is the old guard, the ones that aren't tech forward, they're going to get swallowed up. AI is changing the game a little bit. I mean, and any other technologies. So AI is kind of a general term. A lot of companies will say that, well, my robotic process automation is AI. It's not AI. It's a business rule that says, if this happens, then do this. Or if this happens, don't do this. That's not AI. But there's a lot that you can do within AI. Today, we have to use our own mental horsepower to process. I mean, here's a good example. I had a client that called me the other day. They had a key position. It was a new position for them, but they didn't have a job description. In fact, it's happened twice. And they didn't have time. I don't have time to go print out or open up 10 or 15 of that same type of job and sort of draft a job description. So I basically ran an instruction set within, an AI platform and said, create for me a job description, no more than X number of words with a title, a summary, a list of job duties, and a list of requirements. And within seconds, I had a brilliant. Well, then I realized that I didn't give it specific instructions about heavy equipment. So I said, now rewrite this with a heavy equipment tone, or, with specific to the heavy equipment industry. And it rewrote it for me. And I just saved myself what would have taken me probably an hour before, just going and finding the 10 other jobs that I work on that were similar, trying to pull the little bullet points out of each one to craft this perfect little job description. And in both cases that I sent the job description over, the client was like, wow, this is perfect. And so if you're a recruiter and you're spending an hour trying to draft a job description for a client to just add a little value, that's 1 hour you're not spending finding candidates for your other clients. And so those companies will get swallowed up. They will get basically, if we use another, sort of fish tank analogy, if you have two beta fish in a jar, the beta fish that's going to float to the top is the one that's not tech forward. They're the ones that aren't embracing technology. The other one is going to nibble the other guy to death. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
And we're seeing it already. It's just slow. The
yeah,
uptake on technology is slow. I think there's still a lot around AI that people haven't figured out yet.
yeah,
I mean, even
yeah,
the AI experts are still trying to figure out how to leverage AI, how to build it, how to build functionality into it, how to have it better serve our needs. I mean, they're still figuring that stuff out. So to think that a user of it is going to be that advanced is a bit of a tall order, I think, for now.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I suppose as well in recruitment, there's you're always going to have that human element in recruitment, aren't you? That's never going to go away. You need to get with the times and learn how AI can help you in your business for sure. Them low leverage tasks that, you know, they don't need to be taken out to do anymore.
Right.
What?
And honestly, that's not the part of our jobs we like the most anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So your job satisfaction plummets. Now, for those that love doing that, they're probably not great recruiters.
No. Yeah, I think you're right there. What skills do you think will be the most valuable for recruitment professionals in the next few years? I'm saying probably AI skills will be one of them.
Yeah, I think having a look, if you don't have analytical skills, I mean, it's funny because, historically recruiting was about relationships. It was a Rolodex. I mean, for some of your audience, they probably don't even know what a Rolodex is. You ever heard of the term Rolodex?
I don't think I have. No, no,
Okay.
no.
My
Please
point.
tell.
A Rolodex was a little contraption that you had sitting on your desk that had like business cards in it, and you would just flip through it with a little scrolling sort of dial, and it was alphabetized, and you'd basically just scroll through it until you found the contact. That was recruiting back in the day. You had file cabinets that you would pull the drawer out and flip through files. You'd have some sort of filing methodology that you would use to be able to get people's paper resumes. It was so relationship driven. And today, it's not that it's not relationship driven, but that there's so much around the analytics. Like when I develop a campaign, some of the things that we look at is, okay, well, what's our open rate and what's our reply rate? And if our open rate is 50%, how are we going to engage the 50 that didn't get my message or didn't open my message? Because either it went into a junk folder or they just, didn't know me and they're like, delete. How do we engage those people? If you don't have an analytical mind to sit down and go, or, okay, is it that they got my message, but that my subject just it wasn't attractive to them, Or if it's they got my message, we know that it was opened, but they didn't reply. Why? Was my message not compelling? And so good recruiters have to be able to sit down and sort of look at these things and figure out how to tweak the dial and turn the knobs to improve and perfect the messaging. Do I add another recruiter to this campaign? Would it be better if there were two people tag teaming this contact? Does that improve open rate? You know, is it the third message that you begin to see a higher response rate? And is it work email or personal email that gets better open rates? These are things that if you're a recruiter today and you're not curious and you don't have an analytical mind, you're going to be a hamster on a wheel. And so if you're
Yeah,
if you're one of those recruiters and you don't have somebody on your team who's doing that for you, then you're going to be at a serious disadvantage because there are going to be other recruiters who are going to sit down and they're going to understand how to influence their audience and how to improve their messaging. So we run A/B splits on some of our email campaigns. So in marketing, you're a marketing guy, so you understand probably the term of an A/B split, right? Or split testing. And so you'll send, two emails out with the same message, but formatted differently. And we might use one message with it's graphic intensive and the other one's all text intensive. And we look at the open rates on those. And the better the response rate, the one that gets the better response rate becomes the winner. And we double down on that. Now, how do we make that better? So to me, if you're a recruiter and you don't have an analytical mind, you can't, sort of understand the psychology of recruiting and people and how do I move them to the action that I want from them, then you're going to be, you know, you're going to be a sitting duck. It's going to be hard for you to differentiate. I mean, this is where AI is really going to take off. This is where AI is going to it's going to do that analysis for you. But if you don't know how to train it to do all that stuff, then AI, there is a crossroads between real intelligence and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence doesn't exist without real intelligence, and real intelligence doesn't exist without experience. That's just the simple fact.
yeah. Yeah, well, there's plenty of tools out there to help with analytics. It's not difficult to solve that for sure. You just got to know what tools and how to use it. I suppose it's something that everyone needs to do, really, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, right now, so like I started telling you that we've been using this strategic planning methodology for about 8 years. And, in essence, we've, metamorphosized, it's like a snake shedding its skin. So every quarter we go through replanning, you look at, okay, how do we do against last quarter's objectives? And then what are the objectives this quarter that we need to execute on? And right now, some of the projects that I have is we're implementing a new phone system that's going to basically allow us to track the calls, provide AI summaries on our calls, but it's going to go straight into our applicant tracking system. So we'll have a better single source. Today, our phone system is separate. So we're developing a new website for our Jordan Sitter brand. We have video testimonials that we are developing for a video channel that basically has customer testimonials that talk about their experience working with us. We've got, let's see here, we're migrating, basically using a Google Cloud platform, moving the disparate systems that we have in our stack. We are migrating data, the key data from those systems into a data warehouse in BigQuery, and using a BI tool, the Google Cloud Platform's product called Looker, to build out reports that we can then provide to our clients, which is really fun for us. We do that already, but the platform we use is not ideal for us. These are all things that we're going to be able to launch. So like at the end of a search, or even in the middle of a search, I can report to a client, which again, we do already, but they'll be able to self-service their own reports and see who we have in our campaign, who's in what stage of the process. Are those candidates opening those messages? If they're opening, how many times have they opened? If there's a link in the message, are they clicking on that link? If they did click on it, how many times did they click on it? The video tools that we're using can tell us how much of the video they watched, where they stopped, if they watched it more than once. And so these are all like technological, sort of little tweaks to our current stack where we're integrating everything and then being able to report on that. And so to have these clients be able to dig into a report at the end of our search and say, look, here's how many candidates we recruited for you for this job. This is the percentage of those candidates that were passive job seekers. They weren't going to apply to your job posting. This is how many we screened. Of those, this is how many we submitted. This is how long it took for us to submit you a candidate. This is the percentage of people that we submitted that got an interview. This is how long it took to get to the first interview, and basically provide and lay out all these metrics that show our performance against what they engaged us to accomplish for them. Up to this point, I don't really know of too many companies that engage recruiters that don't have what I call the Wizard of Oz effect. There's somebody behind the curtain. There's work going on, but nobody knows what it is. And all of a sudden they just get a resume one day or two. But they have zero idea of how much work went into actually producing that candidate. Well, we want to provide the evidence. We want to show them what's gone into it. How many candidates have we sourced? How many of those did we screen? And show them, look, this is what goes into this. This is why you cannot just post and pray. So those are some of the fun things that I'm working on. There's some other marketing things like some ebooks and stuff that we're working on that are about to be released.
And you
Yeah. So, look, if you're a recruiter, you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to be a resource for anybody who's trying to figure out the stuff that's taken me 30 years to figure out. If I can help shorten your learning curve, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you're an employer in the heavy equipment space, reputablerecruiting.com. Soon to be our heavy equipment website, which we're still trying to figure out what the URL for that will be. So, find me on LinkedIn, find me at reputablerecruiting.com, or you can email me at jlucas@reputablerecruiting.com.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that, Jay. And that is the 4 Leader Recruiter. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.